So today I'm going to be talking about verse 39 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. In this verse, Bhagavan talks about bondage and liberation. In verse 9, Bhagavan had said that dyads and triads, dyads in that context means pairs of opposites. So bondage and liberation are a pair of opposites. What he said in verse 9 was, dyads and triads exist by always clinging to one thing. That one thing is, what Bhagavan refers to there as one thing is ego. Because dyads and triads seem to exist only in view of ego. Dyads, as I say, means pairs of opposites. Triads means the three factors of objective knowledge. Knower, known, and knowing. That is the knower, the subject, the known, the objects, and the act of knowing. That's the triad. So Bhagavan said dyads and triads exist always clinging to one thing, namely ego. If one looks within the mind to see what that one is, they will cease to exist. The reason they will cease to exist, since they depend for their seeming existence upon the ego in whose view they seem to exist. When we investigate ourselves to see what we really are, ego will cease to exist, and therefore all dyads and triads will cease to exist. And then Bhagavan says, only those who have seen this have seen the reality. See, they will not be confused. So one of the dyads, all pairs of opposites are included in dyads. Dvandvas in Sanskrit, iratikal in Tamil. So one of the dyads and triads is bondage and liberation. So according to Bhagavan, bondage and liberation seem to exist only so long as ego seems to exist. That is what he implies in the first sentence of this verse, verse 39. What he says in this first sentence is, baddhaṉ, baddhaṉ means bandhaṉ, one who is in bondage. Baddhaṉ eṉṉumaṭṭē, bandhamutti cintaṉaigaḻ. That literally means only so long as one says, I am someone bound, thoughts of bondage and liberation. And what it implies is, only so long as one says, I am someone bound, says is there not to be taken literally, it's a metaphorical use. It implies only so long as one is aware of oneself or experiences oneself as if one were bound, will there be thoughts of bandha and mutti, bondage and liberation. Because bondage and liberation, as I say, they're just a pair of opposites. They seem to exist only so long as we rise as ego. And as ego, we always seem to be bound by the limitations, because we identify ourselves with the body, which is bound by the limitations of time and space and so many other limitations. And in verse 24, Bhagavan said bondage is nothing but ego. So long as we arise as ego, we seem to be bound. And so long as we seem to be bound, we have thoughts about bondage and liberation. Because we now seem to be bound, we want to be free from this bondage. We want to be liberated. In the Kalivemba version of this verse, Bhagavan extended this first sentence by adding before it an adverbial clause, maṭṭē. Maṭṭē means a crazy or intoxicated person. So maṭṭē means being a crazy or intoxicated person. With this Kalivemba extension, but this first sentence reads, maṭṭē baddhaṉ eṉṉumaṭṭē, bandhamutti cintaṉaigaḻ. That means only so long as one says, being a crazy person, I am someone bound, thoughts of bondage and liberation, which implies only so long as one says, being a crazy or intoxicated person, I am someone bound. That is only so long as, due to the intoxication of ajnana, one experiences oneself as if one were bound, will there be thoughts of bondage and liberation, bandha mutti. Then the rest of the verse is just one sentence in which, but it's a somewhat, it's a sentence with several clauses. The first clause, Bhagavan says, baddhaṉā eṉṛḍṛutaṉṉaip pārkkuṅgāl. That means when one looks at oneself as who is the one who is bound. That implies when we look at ourselves or investigate ourselves to see who is the one who is bound. Siddhamāy nittamuttaṉ taṉṇiṟka. As a result of that, one remains, or literally one stands, or one remains as oneself, who is nittamuttaṉ. Nittamukta means eternally liberated. One remains as siddham. Siddham means what is firmly established or always accomplished. niṛkādēl, bandhamutti, cintai. When one remains as eternally liberated, if literally means if the thought of bondage cannot stand, cannot remain, though niṛkādēl means, literally means if, it's used in the sense here of since the thought of bondage will not remain, bandacintai muṇṉiṟkumō, will the thought of liberation henceforth remain. So the whole sentence read together is, when one looks at oneself to see who is the one who is bound, and when thereby oneself, the one who is eternally liberated, alone remains as siddham, what is firmly established, always accomplished. Since thought of bondage will not remain, will thought of liberation remain henceforth. What Bhagavan again is stressing the point here. When we investigate ourselves and see ourselves as we really are, that which is eternally liberated, the thought of bondage will no longer remain. So the thought of liberation also cannot be there. That is the dyad of bondage and liberation will cease to exist along with ego, is the implication. Why Bhagavan stresses that bondage and liberation are a triad. So when bondage comes to an end, liberation also comes to an end. The reason for that is, so long as we rise as ego, we seem to be bound. So there seems to be a state that we can attain, or we believe there's a state that we can attain, a state of liberation. But ego itself can never be liberated. The ego can be liberated only by dying. That is, so long as we rise as ego, the very nature of ego is to be bound by limitations. So if we want to be liberated, there's no such thing as a liberated ego or a liberated person. If we want to be liberated, we have to cease rising as ego. When we cease rising as ego, what remains is our real nature, which is eternally liberated. Since it's eternally liberated, it is beyond the duality of bondage and liberation. That is, for our real nature, there is no such thing as bondage. Since there's no such thing as bondage, there's also no such thing as liberation, because liberation is not, the idea of liberation can arise only if there's bondage. If bondage doesn't exist at all, the question of liberation doesn't arise. Along with this verse, it's also useful to read one sentence in the 16th paragraph of Nāṇa, in which Bhagavan defines what is mukti. What he says in that sentence is, Bandhatil irkum tanya eṇṛṛu vicharitu tanyatata sarupate terindu kolvade mukti. That means investigating. The implication here is by investigating who is oneself, who is in bondage, knowing one's yatata sarupa. Yatata sarupa means one's actual nature, one's own actual nature. That is mukti. That is when we investigate ourselves, the ego, the one who is in bondage. Ego will cease to exist. Then we will know our real nature, and knowing our real nature is mukti. But who is it who knows our real nature? Obviously, it's not ego, because so long as we rise as ego, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. Because ego is a mistaken awareness of ourselves. It's an awareness of ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So long as we rise as ego, we cannot know our real nature. As ego, we can never know our real nature, because ego it arises as a result of ignorance of our real nature. Ego is an awareness of ourself as a body. Without being ignorant of ourselves, of our real nature, we cannot be aware of ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So as ego, we can never know our real nature. When we investigate ourselves to see who is this one who is in bondage, in other words, who is this ego, ego will cease to exist, because it has no real existence. It seems to exist only because we look elsewhere. When we look at ego, there's no such thing to be found. When ego ceases to exist, what remains is our real nature, which always knows itself. So what knows our real nature is not ego, but only our real nature. Our real nature always knows itself, so it is always liberated. So bondage and liberation seem to be real so long as we rise as ego. When we investigate this ego and find that there's no such thing as ego, therefore there's no bondage. And in the absence of bondage, how can there be liberation? Liberation has a meaning only if you're liberated from something, but there's nothing to be liberated from, because our real nature is never bound by anything. It's only as ego that we seem to be bound. And we seem to be ego only because of avichara, that is non-investigation, pramada, because we don't attend to ourselves, investigate ourselves keenly enough, we seem to be ego. So ego arises as a result of, well, we can't literally say it arises as a result of, because it's only after it arises that we, ego and avichara, non-investigation, lack of self-attentiveness, are one and the same thing. So we can't say which is the cause, because they're just two ways of describing the same thing. The very nature of ego is to be self-ignorant, self-forgetful, unaware of ourselves as we actually are. And because we're unaware of ourselves as we actually are, we're aware of ourselves as something other than we actually are. So the very nature of ego is bondage and ajnana, ignorance. When we investigate this ego and see what we actually are, ego thereby ceases to exist. And what remains is what is ever liberated, which is our own real nature. It's ever liberated, but it's ever liberated, even to say it's ever liberated, that is true from the perspective of ego, but from the perspective of our real nature, it can't even be said to be ever liberated, because there's no such thing as bondage, so liberation has no meaning. So Bhagavan isn't saying that liberation isn't a worthy goal to seek, but he's clarifying the nature of liberation. When we are liberated, we go beyond the duality of bondage and liberation. We go beyond all dualities. And what remains then is what is ever as it is, never undergoes any change. So metaphorically speaking, we can say, as Bhagavan says here, nittamuttaṉ, eternally liberated. That is, our real nature is eternally liberated. But it's beyond the thoughts of bondage and liberation. So that's the explanation of that verse. So if anyone would like to ask questions, either about that verse or about any other aspect of Bhagavan's teachings.
So there is a Upadesa Undiyar verse, right, Michael?
Yes, thank you.
Bandhaveeratra paraso mutravar indhanilai nittal undi para ireipani nittalam undi para. It's almost similar.
It is very similar. Yes, you reminded me. I meant to refer to that and I forgot about it. What Bhagavan says in that verse, that is just like this is verse 39, is the second last verse of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. In the second last verse of Upadesa Undiyar, that's in verse 29, Bhagavan touches upon this subject a little bit also. What he says in that verse is, bandha vidatra parasukamutravā indhanilai nittal undi para ireipani nittalam undi para. What that means is abiding in this state. That is, this state refers to the state he mentioned in the previous verse. The previous verse he had said, if one knows what the nature of oneself is, then what will remain or what will exist is anadi, beginningless, ananta, endless or infinite, akhanda, unbroken, undivided, unfragmented, satchidananda. So that's the state he's referring to in this verse 29. Abiding in this state, thereby experiencing supreme bliss, which is devoid of bondage and liberation. That's devoid of the duality of bondage and liberation. Ireipani nittral is abiding in the service of God. That is, when we attain our real nature, that is beyond bondage and liberation. Because why is it beyond bondage and liberation? Because there's no bondage for our real nature, therefore there is no liberation. That's why Bhagavan often stresses that bondage and liberation have a meaning only so long as we seem to be in bondage. When we realize our real nature, which is ever liberated or never bound, whichever way we want to put it, then the ideas of bondage and liberation have no meaning. It is beyond that duality. But thank you for reminding me about that. I wanted to mention that.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, Shohan has raised the hand. Let me. Yeah, go ahead, Shohan.
Hi, Michael. Namaste.
Namaste.
So this question is not directly related to this. I really understood what this verse, you explained it very well. My question may seem a little juvenile to you at this point, but I'm actually engulfed in it. So my question is, like, I accidentally hurt someone's feeling at work, someone's ego at work. So did Bhagavan say anything about what to do if you hurt someone else's ego? Because like, I can give you more specifics if you want, but that's the general thing.
It happens sometimes. We with no intention on our part, we say something that hurts another person, pricks their ego. What is done. We can't undo it. Maybe to some extent you can you can put that person at ease and make them, reassure them in some way. It all depends on the circumstances. But what is done is done. Bhagavan said we shouldn't dwell upon past actions, because they will only, we can't rectify the past. And in the future we can't rectify, because what is destined to happen in this life is already pre-planned, already predetermined. So what we can do is surrender ourselves completely. That is what Bhagavan recommends. Even the concern about, oh dear, I hurt that person's feelings, I pricked that person's ego, even that we have to leave that to Bhagavan to take care of it. It's happened, we can't undo it, just leave it to Bhagavan. He will take care of all such things. The more we surrender our burdens to Bhagavan, the more carefree we will be, and the easier it will be for us to turn deeper within. So ultimately, we need to wean our mind off its concern with external things, because our external life is already predetermined. What actions we're going to do, what seemingly good actions, seemingly bad actions, all these are predetermined. That doesn't mean that all actions are predetermined, because we can, though what is to happen is already predetermined, and in order for us to experience what is predetermined, if it was predetermined but you were going to do something to hurt that person's ego, you will be made to do that, because that's part of the destiny. You can't avoid that. But at the same time, body, speech, and mind are being driven by destiny to do those actions which are necessary for us in order for us to experience our destiny. They're also being driven by our will. So our will is constantly interfering and thereby creating fresh karma. How to deal with that? We can't rectify our actions. We need to go back to the root. Firstly, we need to keep a check on our desires, our likes, dislikes, all the things that are driving us to do actions, likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. The more we keep a check on those, the more we keep we curb our desires, the less our actions will be driven by them. But we cannot curb them entirely so long as we rise as ego, because the very nature of ego is to have desires, to have attachments, to have likes and dislikes. So we can lessen the strength of our desires and attachments, and likes and dislikes and so on. We cannot get rid of them entirely so long as we rise as ego. Ego is the root. If you have a dense bush, you need to cut off. If you want to cut up a root of a dense bush, you first need to cut a lot of the leaves and branches in order to reach the root. But if you continue just cutting the leaves and branches, they'll continue sprouting. So merely cutting the leaves and branches, that is a means to an end, not an end in itself. So we have to curb our desires and attachment as best we can, but we need to cut up the root. The root is ego. So it's only by self-investigation that we can surrender our desires and attachments to a certain extent. We cannot surrender them completely without surrendering ourself. That is, ourself as ego. So in order to surrender ourself as ego, the only means is self-investigation. So we need to turn within more and more and more. Then our will be interfering less in what's happening outside. Our will cannot change anything that is destined to happen. But though we cannot change what is destined to happen, we're free to want to change it. We're free to try to change it. We're just not free to change it. But by wanting to change it and trying to change it, we are unnecessarily creating fresh karma, and we are nourishing and sustaining ego. So to the extent possible, we need to reduce our desires, attachments, likes, dislikes, hopes, fears, all these things. We need to reduce these as much as possible, but as a means to an end. The end is turning our attention within to investigate this ego, and thereby surrender ourselves. When we surrender ourselves, we automatically surrender our will along with ourselves. Without surrendering ourselves, we cannot surrender our will entirely. Is that an adequate answer to your question?
Yes, yes, thank you. Yes, it's interesting that you mentioned that it was a little bit maybe a fate, because this person, he like takes pride in his work, and I accidentally like showed a flaw in his work. So
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's my ego also, because I'm imagining myself in his scenario and how I would feel, how my ego would be hurt and all that stuff.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's natural when we hurt someone, we feel hurt because we don't want to hurt anyone. So it hurts us to hurt someone. But even that, we shouldn't dwell on that for too long.
Okay.
As you say, it's our own ego is playing its part there. So our aim is to subside. Even to feel guilty, we have to rise. Why should we give room even to that rising of a guilt?
Sorry, Michael, you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, sorry. Even to feel guilty, we have to rise. So we shouldn't give room even to rising of that feeling of guilt. Does that make it clear?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
Next question is for Satya. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this verse is extremely important in day-to-day life. I think, if I understood correctly, I'm neither bound nor liberated. So there is no such thing as prarabdha karma or sanchita karma, because when we think of those terms, then we are creating the atmosphere that I am bound by those. But I think the essence of this verse is simply to deny such a thing exists, because I'm neither bound nor liberated.
Well, it has a deeper meaning than that. That is, so long as we rise as ego, we are bound. We are bound by limitations. We cannot escape from prarabdha. We cannot escape from doing agamya without surrendering ego. So long as we rise as ego is what gives life to the three karma. So what is eternally liberated is not ego. Our real nature is eternally liberated. As ego, we are bound so long as we rise as ego. So what Bhagavan is merely saying, I am not bound, doesn't solve the problem. We can't free ourselves from the limitations imposed on us by ego, merely by thinking I am liberated, I'm not bound. We have to investigate ourselves to see who is it who is bound. What is it ego that rises and experiences itself as a person? As a person, we are bound. We're limited by time, we're limited by space, we're limited in so many ways. So we cannot escape from bondage merely by thinking, I am not bound. We have to investigate ourselves. That's why Bhagavan emphasized in this verse. In the second sentence, he begins, baddhaṉā eṉṛḍṟutaṉnai pārkkuṅgāl. When one looks at oneself, to see who is bound. So it's necessary that we cannot liberate ourselves merely by thinking, oh, I'm not bound. We need to investigate ourselves to see what we actually are. Only when we know our real nature, we know our yathartha sarupa, as Bhagavan describes it in this verse, will we be, oh no, not in this verse, in that sentence in Nāṇā, only when we know our real nature, will we see that we are ever liberated. So merely thinking we are ever liberated is just like thinking, I am Brahman. I'm not affected by anything. That's fine, yes, we are Brahman, we're not affected by anything. But we still feel we're affected because we're not aware of ourselves as Brahman. We may be thinking I am Brahman, but who is the I who is thinking I am Brahman? It's this little ego. So that is not the solution. Who am I? We need to investigate ourselves. We need to see what we actually are. Then only we will see, oh, I'm ever liberated. Not even I'm ever liberated. I'm never bound. I never rose as ego. Does that answer your question at all?
But both are only thoughts, whether the thought of being bound or thought of being liberated.
Yes.
Both of them are thoughts.
Yes.
So, so I'm influenced by my own thoughts, and by investigating about myself, I want to be liberated. So is that not the ultimate goal of self-investigation?
Yes, it is. It is. We need to investigate ourselves to see what we actually are. When we see what we actually are, we will see that we were ever liberated. Until then, we seem to be bound. But it's true, as you say, both bondage and liberation are both thoughts. But who is it who thinks these thoughts? You say I. That I, but is now thinking I am bound, or thinking in future I will be liberated. That I is ego. That is the problem. That ego itself is the bondage. That is the first of all thoughts and the root of all other thoughts. No other thought can arise unless we rise as ego. Because other thoughts seem to exist only in the view of ourselves as ego. So it's not other thoughts which are a problem. What is the first thought? That is ego. That is the root problem. That is what we've got to deal with. That is what can be dealt with only by self-investigation.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Next, Stephen, go ahead, please.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Okay. I think Shohan's question was really good, and your response was clear. And what I have is a variation of that, where his was an accidental hurting somebody's ego. What happens when it was intentional, where I get angry and hurt somebody's feeling? Is apology, is that ego?
Apology, we can't say simply. Sometimes we may apologize in order to appear humble, for example.
Yeah.
We can take pride in appearing to be humble. Our aim is not to appear to be humble. Our aim is to be really humble. If it takes a swallowing of our pride to apologize, then that may be beneficial. But we can't say which outward, but apologizing is an outward action. What is the motive for it? If it's because we really in our heart genuinely want to apologize, then that is good. To that extent, ego is subsiding. Instead of saying, "No, I was right, he was wrong," if we feel, okay, yes, I did wrong, and we apologize, that to that extent our ego is subsiding. Whatever we can do to subdue our ego is beneficial. But we have to be, the trouble with outward actions, ego can often trick us. We can sometimes do it because we want to feel, we want to pride ourselves in our humility. That's a trick of the ego. So there's no simple answer to these questions. What we have to understand is, what is our aim? Our aim is to subside, subside, subside. To the extent that we subside, to that extent it is good, Bhagavan says in the final paragraph of Nāṇā. So we do need to, it can be appropriate to apologize, but we shouldn't take pride in the fact that we've apologized, because that can have the opposite effect.
Yeah, that answers my question. So what I hear in that is that if I apologize from authenticity, like love,
yeah,
then that's a workable place to be.
Yeah. If you
Thank you.
apologize because ego is subsiding, that is good. If you apologize to make ego feel better about itself, that is not good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ram, go ahead, please.
Ego is a tricky fellow to deal with. And ego isn't someone else. Ego is ourselves. We ourselves are a tricky one.
Robert, this is Ram here. Good morning. When you were talking about Chauhan's situation, that everything is predestined, but we still sort of need to act, and then ego and all that. But the real action needs to be that we need to be silent, like Ramana says, and we shouldn't we be figuring out how to reduce our thoughts and get them to a point where the thoughts do not occur? Because everything is a thought. I mean, the situation that Chauhan said is just a thought. If that thought was not there, that situation is not there.
And the one to whom it is a problem is also a thought. That is ego. Oh, sorry, my mind went blank there. Sorry, can you ask again? Because suddenly it went from my mind.
Sure. The key question is really, since everything is predestined and we still say there is something we need to act on,
right? Okay.
Isn't that a matter of being silent?
What is it that acts? There are three instruments of action: mind, speech, and body. Keeping quiet doesn't mean the mind, speech, and body not acting, because as Bhagavan says in the first sentence of his note to his mother, according to the destiny of each one, he who is for that will make them act. So there are certain actions our body, speech, and mind have to go through in order for us to experience our prarabdha. So keeping the body, speech, and mind inactive is not our aim. That is not truly keeping quiet. I can sit here doing nothing, but that's not really keeping quiet, because I'm sitting here. I'm still identifying with a body that is sitting here, a mind that is trying to be quiet. The problem is doership. So long as we identify ourselves with the body, speech, and mind, whatever actions they do, we will feel, I am doing this. That is the problem. That doership is the nature of ego. We cannot get rid of doership without getting rid of ego. So the only way to get rid of the doership is to investigate ourselves. So yes, we do need to investigate ourselves. But so long as we rise as ego, this prarabdha, agamya, all these things, they play their role. But all that Bhagavan taught us about karma is for one purpose alone, is to help us in turning within. We cannot change anything that happens externally. Whatever is to happen is going to happen. Whatever is not to happen is not going to happen. We cannot change that, however much we may want to. So why to want to change anything externally? We need to be concerned about turning within and subduing this ego, which we could do only by investigating ourselves. Does that answer your question?
It does. Turning within and taking care of within. Yes, it makes sense.
But so long as we turn outwards, we are bound by prarabdha. Bhagavan said, prarabdha affects only the outward turn mind. Prarabdha can never prevent us from turning within. So we're always free to turn within, but so long as we turn outward, we have to experience whatever prarabdha has in store for us.
Right. It was so on that connection, when we say everything is destined, is it also destined that when we realize is also destined, or is it?
No. Because But action is finite. So finite actions can only bring about finite results. Liberation is beyond all limitations. So no action can be the cause of liberation. That's a fundamental principle of Bhagavan's teachings and also Shankara's teachings. Any amount of action cannot bring about liberation. So liberation has nothing to do with prarabdha. Liberation is the annihilation of ego, the non-rising of ego. So only by turning our attention within. Prarabdha cannot make us turn our attention within. That's entirely up to us. Do we want to turn within or not? It's our will that determines whether we turn within or not. Prarabdha determines what we are to experience so long as we're turning outwards. Whether we turn within or not is up to us. But do we want to turn within? Do we want to surrender ourselves? If we want to surrender ourselves, we will then try to turn within to see who am I? Who is this I who is rising and having this will and wanting to do this and wanting to change that? Who is this I? That is only it's up to our will, not up to our destiny. So we are always, whatever our destiny may be, we are always free to investigate ourselves and thereby attain the. All that is required is willingness. Now we feel, oh, I'm trying to investigate myself, it's very difficult, I'm not able to attain liberation. Why? Because we don't want to attain it. We really want liberation. It's ours here and now. The problem is we say we want liberation, but we also want so many other things. Only when we give up all desires for everything else and want only liberation, then liberation is very, very easy. Bhagavan once said, jokingly, everyone who comes here says they're coming only for liberation. But if I show even a small sample of liberation, all the crows will fly away and I'll be left sitting here alone. That means we do want liberation, but we don't want it enough. Our love for it to be liberated needs to be all-consuming. We need to give up all other desires and just want to be as we actually are. That's what desire for liberation means, the desire just to be. Not to rise or know anything.
Okay. And there is a definite end to the thoughts, correct?
Oh, definite. When ego comes to an end, everything comes to an end. So all our efforts are only for getting rid of this ego. And how can we get rid of the ego? We can't get rid of it because it doesn't exist. In order to get rid of it, we need to investigate ourselves and see that we never rose as ego. That is getting rid of ego. So the way to be liberated is to see what we actually are and see that we are always liberated. We were never bound. We never rose as ego. That is the ultimate truth. But in order to see that truth, we need to see ourselves. We need to see what we actually are. That's why
an effort is needed.
Is essential.
So the summary is an effort is needed, and there has to be so much desire that it consumes your nerves and senses. It's like there has to be that burning desire to turn with it.
You can call it burning desire. They call it mumukshutvam. We can also call it love. It's the love to surrender ourselves completely.
Good. Next.
Talk about desire. We desire for things other than ourselves. The desire for liberation is not a desire for anything other than ourselves. It's a desire for what we always actually are.
Right.
So it's only by desiring to cease rising as ego. In other words, the loving just to be. That is the true desire for liberation.
Next, I have Manoj. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Namaste, Michael. My name is Manoj. I have a question about investigation and self-attention. I have gotten to a state where I'll say meditation or self-attention. I'm going to say that they're one and the same. I'm assuming, since I'm relatively new to this group. When I've experienced the deep meditation, there are moments where I have experienced just my mind has been completely quiet, and it really is blissful. It's not often that happens, but when it has happened, it's extremely, let's say, potent, and I want to stay in that state. And sometimes it's even hard to come back to this reality. So my question is, how do I versus the higher self, I guess, or who we are naturally, how can I distinguish that the ego's gone or annihilated? And I'm sure it's not annihilated, and I also wish to stay there.
Okay.
Does that mean that the ego is still wanting?
But first thing to be clear, what we are seeking when we investigate ourselves is not any experience, is not any new experience. In order, whatever we may experience during meditation, we experience it because we are there as the experiencer. So self-investigation has nothing to do with, all sorts of experiences may arise during the course of our spiritual practice. Whatever experience may arise, however blissful it may be, however sublime it may be, we have to investigate who is it who is experiencing this. So our concern is not about experience. Our concern is with knowing who is the experiencer. So we need to be constantly turning our attention back to ourselves. Who is it who is enjoying this? Who is it who feels I am in a state of calmness? So we constantly need to turn our attention back to ourselves. When we investigate ourselves, the more we investigate ourselves, the more ego subsides. When ego subsides completely, there is no one left to experience anything. What remains then is sometimes called an experience, Atma-vichara or Swarupanubhuti or Atmanubhava, or some terms are used. But it's an experience completely unlike any other experience. It's an experience which our mind cannot conceive, because all other experiences come and go. And anything that comes and goes, it appears in our awareness and it disappears from our awareness. The awareness in which it appears and disappears is not our real awareness. It's only as ego. So experiences come and go during waking and dream. Do you have any experiences during sleep? No, we don't have any. We're not aware of anything we're aware in sleep without being aware of anything. Nothing, we're not aware of any phenomena. So what we are seeking is that background that exists alone in sleep, that background of pure awareness. That is what we are seeking. How to find that background of pure awareness? That background of pure awareness. In sleep, what remains is only ourself. So we are that background of pure awareness. So it's by turning our attention more and more back towards ourselves that we can remain, that we can be as we actually are. Being as we actually are can metaphorically be called an experience, but actually is self-awareness an experience? We're always aware of ourselves. The problem now is we're aware of ourselves as something other than what we actually are. For example, I'm aware of myself as Michael. You're aware of yourself as I am Manoj. You are not Manoj, I am not Michael. What is only I am, not I am this or that. Even I am Brahman is not true. Only I am. Because Brahman is I am. Brahman doesn't say I am Brahman. Just like there's no need for Brahman to think I am Brahman. Brahman just is aware of itself as I am. That is our real nature.
So it's what you're saying is this is an actually a perpetual question of who am I? And
but it's not even a question of who am I. It's investigating who am I. We can go on asking who am I any number of times. That is not the
okay. Investigation.
Who is the I who is asking who am I? We need to be turning our attention back. We need to look at ourselves very carefully. Look at obviously doesn't mean in a literal sense. We're not looking with our eyes. With our inner eye, we have to look at ourselves to see what we actually are. So inner eye means our attention. We need to constantly turning our attention within, trying to be aware of ourselves as we actually are.
If I'm to continue to want an experience, just by saying I want the experience or the desire, then I'm having the ego's experience.
Yes, and all experience is for ego. Anything that comes and goes, any experience that comes and goes, comes and goes only in the view of ego. So it's only when we rise as ego that we have this experience and then that experience and then some other experience. Throughout the waking and dream, our experiences are constantly changing. No experience is constant, is it? It's only
correct.
It's inconstancy. But what we are seeking is that which is ever present. Whether we rise as ego or not, we're always aware I am. In waking, I'm aware I am. In dream, I'm aware I am. In sleep, I'm aware I am. So that basic awareness, that self-awareness, that is the screen on which this picture of waking and dream appear and disappear. So anything that appears and disappears is not what is real. And what sees what appears and disappears is not real, because that is ego. So you asked also how to know when you're free of ego, when nothing appears or disappears, when you remain as you are in sleep. That is the state free of ego. But though we talk about sleep, in sleep, Bhagavan clarified, what remains in sleep is only pure awareness. That is what we actually are. But because even now we are that, but because we are not aware of ourselves now as we actually are, our memory of sleep is in some subtle way clouded. So we are not able, from the perspective of our view in waking and dream, sleep seems to be a state in which we don't know ourselves. Because we don't know ourselves now, we see sleep through those colored glasses of self-ignorance. So sleep also seems to be a state of self-ignorance. Looking through red-colored glasses, everything will appear red. So when we're looking through the glasses of self-ignorance, sleep also seems to be a state of self-ignorance. And that's why it's sometimes described in Advaita texts. Sleep is described as a state of self-ignorance. But that's only from the perspective of ourself as ego in waking and dream. Bhagavan says, actually, it's just a state of pure awareness. But as ego, we cannot clearly recollect that. We know that we existed in sleep. We know that we were aware in sleep. But exactly what was that experience is now clouded because of our having risen as ego now. So it's because of our current self-ignorance or self-forgetfulness that sleep seems to be a state of self-ignorance or self-forgetfulness.
So is sleep an experience? Well, I'm trying to be careful with my language. So is sleep an experience of I am, or the being of no ego?
I am denotes self-awareness. We can call it an experience if we want, but we are always aware of I am. Ego, there's nothing that we experience in sleep that we don't experience now. But now, that Bhagavan often used to say, the background, I am, the self-awareness, is like the screen. Waking and dream are states when pictures are projected on the screen. Sleep is the state when no pictures are projected on the screen. But whether pictures are projected or not, the screen remains as it is. So I am, that fundamental self-awareness, that fundamental awareness of our own existence, that is ever there in the background. That's what remains alone in sleep. But and in waking and dream, when other things are, it's still there as the background.
Okay.
So this is what we need.
So
this is what we need to attend to more and more and more. It's just that fundamental self-awareness.
So in the meditation, it's also like that, the sleeping state.
The real meditation is swarupa, what Bhagavan sometimes describes as swarupa dhyana. That's meditation on our real nature. That means self-attentiveness. It's trying to attend just to I am.
So I've heard that, you know, there are some people who go into the forest and they meditate, and they can meditate for days and months and some even years.
Yes.
That's the state at which they've gone beyond their ego, or they've just transcended.
Going to a forest doesn't enable you to go beyond ego. Because who is it? I have gone to the forest. I am sitting in the forest. I'm all on my own. I'm meditating. That I is ego. Where we can go anywhere we like. Go to the moon, Mars, or somewhere. We still can't escape this ego. If we want to escape ego, there's only one place we have to go. There's only one cave in which we have to sit. That is the cave of our own heart. In other words, we have to turn within. So that's why Bhagavan didn't attach much importance to external renunciation. Some of Bhagavan's devotees were sannyasis. Bhagavan had no objection against sannyasa. Bhagavan said, just like marriage comes or doesn't come according to prarabdha, sannyasa comes or doesn't come according to prarabdha. Sannyasa means, in this context, the outward renunciation. But the real sannyasa is the inward renunciation. Whatever your external circumstances of life may be, we're always free to turn within and to inwardly renounce. So Bhagavan said the real renunciation, renouncing everything, is investigating what this ego is. That's what he says in verse 26 to Uڵḷadu. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what it is giving up everything, he says. So if you want to renounce everything, you don't have to go to the Himalayas or sit in a cave or anything. You just have to turn your attention within. That is renouncing everything.
Wow, that's, you help me distinguish that I've been looking outward, not inward.
Yes, yes.
From my heart about.
It's all about looking inward, looking inwards, looking inwards.
Right. Okay. The renunciation from within. Okay.
Yes.
I got that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
External has to be renounced. And the only way to renounce everything external is by going within. And
renouncing it from within first. Okay,
yeah. Okay. We don't even have to renounce it. If we go within, that itself is renouncing it. We don't have to give up the world. If we attend to ourselves, we are automatically ceasing to attend to the world. So just by merely attending to ourselves, we are freeing ourselves from the world. We're renouncing the world.
So it's a continual or perpetual self-attention and investigation.
Yes, yes, yes. In practice, it may not always be continuous because we still have desires and attachments, so our mind continues jumping out. However, Bhagavan said, it doesn't matter how many times it jumps out. Every time it jumps out, bring it back within. If we continue persevering in trying to bring it back within again, 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 eventually we will succeed. Bhagavan has given us that assurance. So we have to be trying as perpetually as we can.
Is that, this brings up another thing, if I may ask. Is that where there's ascension happening after a certain stage of self-attention and awareness where we just transcend?
We transcend everything only when we are free of ego. So by turning within more and more and more, when we see what we actually are, ego will thereby be destroyed. Thereby we transcend everything. But in fact, we don't even transcend everything because there's nothing remaining there to transcend. So but what it's transcending is a relative term. There must be something to transcend, to go beyond. Once we've gone beyond, we find that there was nothing to go beyond.
Right. That's unifying with God, I guess, is one way to put it. Okay.
That's one of many ways of putting it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you very much. Okay.
The next question is Shohan. I'm going to just unmute you. Go ahead, Shohan.
I think it was Deepti before me. She was going in.
That's fine. You're already on. So go ahead. I'll put her on next. Yeah.
Okay. So yes, Michael, my question is, it sprang from something Anil used to say. Anil Akhawa, he's another devotee in our satsang, you know him. He used to say that when we turn outwards and in this world, when we, in other words, in his words, we transact with the outside world, we do so with thought. So when we turn inwards, when we transact with ourselves, do we have anything other than thoughts to do that with? When we turn inwards, can we do anything without thought, even turning inwards?
The attention we pay to anything other than ourselves is a thought. The attention we pay to ourselves is the subsidence of all thoughts. Thoughts always have an object. In fact, so when we are attending to anything, any other thing, when we're thinking about anything other than ourselves, when we're aware of anything other than ourselves, that is a thought. When we turn our attention back towards ourselves, to the extent that we remove all awareness of all other things from our view, there's some background noise there. Sorry. So, the more we turn our attention within, the more we are withdrawing ourselves from all thought. Because the more keenly we focus our attention on ourselves, the more other things recede into the background. And to the extent they recede into the background, they are just thoughts. So it's thoughts are leaving us to the extent that we attend to ourselves.
Even when we attend to ourselves and look at ourselves, can we do that without thinking about ourselves?
But that's why I tried to define what is thinking. Yeah. Thinking is attending to something other than ourselves. When we attend to ourselves, thoughts. When we attend to ourselves, ego subsides. Ego is the first thought. So to the extent ego subsides, all other thoughts subside along with it. So the way to go beyond thought is to attend only to ourselves. The more keenly we attend to ourselves, the more we are separating ourselves from thought. Because ego is thereby subsiding. Without ego, there can be no other thoughts. Because ego is the first thought and root of all other thoughts. All other thoughts seem to exist only in the view of ourself as ego. So when we don't rise as ego, there are no thoughts.
Okay, so that's a giveaway that we're not focusing on ourselves. Is if we have thoughts arising about our own selves, that means we're not focusing.
We shouldn't be concerned about thoughts.
Okay.
Suppose a thought arises. Who is aware of it? I am. Without me being aware of it, that thought couldn't have arisen. So let's take it that thought has arisen to remind me to attend to myself. If we can use thoughts as a reminder, oh, you've forgotten to attend to yourself, attend to yourself. So our whole interest should be on attending to ourselves. We can forget about thoughts. Let thoughts take care of themselves. They're not our problem. Our problem is only to attend to ourselves. That's why Bhagavan said, what does it matter however many thoughts arise? Whatever thought may arise, whom does it arise? To me. Turn within to see who is that me.
Next is Deepthi. Go ahead.
Namaskar, Michael. Can you hear me all right? Sorry, there's like long.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, Michael, so this seems to be a conundrum. In terms, it's like a catch-22. I can, when I'm aware, when I'm being attentively self-aware of myself, being aware of being aware, in other words, it is not an experience. So how will I know that I am aware of how will I know I'm being self-attentively aware?
It is an experience and it's not an experience. It's not an experience in the sense of it's not an experience of something other than ourselves, but it is an experience of ourselves. Our very nature is self-awareness. So we cannot ever not be self-aware. The problem is we are not just self-aware, we are now aware of ourselves and of other things. And whenever we're aware of other things, we mistake ourselves to be one of those other things, maybe this person. So,
yes, but when I am aware of myself as just as I am, I stop with I am, not I am this, I am that, I'm talking, listen, none of that. I am, but that is a non-experience.
You can, we shouldn't get, words can sometimes confuse us. It's neither, it's not an experience in this, like other experiences, but we are aware of ourselves. Self-awareness, in a sense, is an experience. It's not an experience of something other than ourselves, it's an experience of ourselves. So, we shouldn't be too much worried about these words awareness, experience or non-experience. Our aim is just to experience ourselves or be aware of ourselves as we actually are. So let's attend to ourselves more and more and more. The more keenly our attention is focused on ourselves, the more it is thereby withdrawn from other things. To the extent that it's withdrawn from other things, ego subsides. And when ego subsides completely and is swallowed by self-awareness, what remains, that is what we actually are.
Yes, no, I'm not trying to, I don't care about the words, but I'm referring to my experience when I am being attentively self-aware. It's, I don't know.
Okay. There's a term in Sanskrit, Visheshanubhava. Visheshanubhava means a special or an experience that stands out, an experience that is an exceptional experience. There's nothing exceptional about it, because what is always present, that is all we want to experience. What is always present is only I am. So there's nothing exceptional about I am. So being aware of ourselves is a nirviseshanubhava. There's nothing exceptional about it, because it's ever present. There's never a moment when we're not aware of ourselves. So our aim is just to remain with that nirviseshanubhava, that non-exceptional experience of I am. And to the extent that we focus our attention on that non-exceptional experience, all exceptional experiences withdraw into the background. So it's the Visheshanubhava that we want to be free of. It's the Nirviseshanubhava that we want to remain with.
So it's a non-exceptional experience. So I shouldn't be looking for peace or bliss or ananda.
No. Anything that appears and disappears is exceptional. We're looking for what is constant. When we see what is constantly there, then that is infinite bliss, infinite peace. But we're not looking for the peace that appears, comes and goes. We're looking for the peace that is ever present, as I am. So it's only by turning our attention more and more towards ourselves, trying to be more and more keenly self-attentive, more keenly aware of ourselves, that we can withdraw ourselves from all the Visheshanubhava, all the exceptional experiences, and remain with the non-exceptional experience of I am. And to the extent that we remain with that non-exceptional experience, to that extent does ego subside. And when we are aware only of that non-exceptional experience, ego is swallowed forever. And then we live eternally in that nirviseshanubhava. And when ego ceases to exist, all viseshanubhava, all exceptional experiences come to an end. Because all exceptional experiences appear only in the view of ourself as ego.
Yes. Yes, because when I think of my experience of sleep, or when I recollect it now, I know I slept, but during sleep, I had no experience of sleep. It's like a recollection.
Well, no, in sleep, we weren't aware of sleep. We were just aware of I am. So that awareness of I am was there. And we clearly remember, yes, I slept. We all know we slept. But what exactly that experience was, we cannot recollect now, because we are not aware of, now we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So since we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are now, we cannot be aware of ourselves as we actually were in sleep. So our recollection of sleep is clouded by our present self-forgetfulness.
Yes.
As I said earlier, self-forgetfulness doesn't actually exist in sleep, but our recollection of sleep is clouded by our present self-forgetfulness. So it is sometimes said, oh yes, in sleep self-forgetfulness remains. Something that is given as an explanation, but that's an explanation that's appropriate at a certain level. But when we go deeper, how can there be self-forgetfulness in sleep when there's no ego to be self-forgetful? What is self-forgetful is only ego. Self-forgetfulness is the nature of ego. In the absence of ego, there's no self-forgetfulness. But because we now experience ourselves as this self-forgetful ego, we cannot recollect what we experienced in sleep. Because what we experience in sleep is the self that we have now forgotten. Not forgotten. We're always aware, but we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are.
So the waking state is continuous state of ego?
Yes, waking and dream are states of ego.
So right now I am in the waking state, right?
I that is in the waking state is ego.
Okay, all right. I which is okay, all right. So then that is impossible, but I'm being put up for like a task that's impossible, because I that is in the waking state cannot by its very nature go to that state of awareness.
You don't have to go to that state. You only need to see yourself. When ego sees itself, it ceases to be ego and remains as our real nature.
Okay.
It's just like we don't have to find the rope. All we need to do is look very carefully at the snake. If we look very carefully at the snake, what will we see? A rope. So let's not worry about the rope now. Now we don't see, now it seems to us that we don't see any rope. We only see a snake. So look at the snake very carefully. When you look at the snake very carefully, you'll see, oh, I was only looking at a rope all the time. I wasn't ever seeing a snake. I was only seeing a rope. It seemed to be a snake, but it was actually only a rope. Likewise, what actually exists is only pure awareness, even now.
Yes.
But it seems to us to be ego. So what do? We look at this ego very carefully. If we look at it carefully enough, you see it's just pure awareness.
Oh, so it like transmutates itself into pure awareness.
It doesn't. Does the snake transmutate itself into a rope?
Oh, no.
It was always a rope. It was never anything like a rope.
Okay.
It's only the snake is a mere appearance. Ego is a mere appearance. What is it that appears as ego? It is pure awareness. In whose view does it appear as ego? Only in the view of ego. So if ego looks at itself and sees what it actually is, it will see it's just pure awareness, and thereby ego is devoured. That's why Buddha says in verse 21 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, he says very beautifully, Uṇādal Kān. Uṇādal Kān literally means becoming food is seeing. What does that mean? Only when we are swallowed by that self-awareness, that pure awareness, are we seeing pure awareness. Because ego, we can never see pure awareness. But if we allow ourselves to be swallowed by pure awareness, that itself is seeing pure awareness. Because pure awareness is always seeing pure awareness and nothing else. And that is what we actually are.
Wonderful. Great, great. Well, I'll try to, yes, be swallowed. Yes.
Okay, the next question is from Ram.
Well, the question that I have, I think some of which you alluded to before, is our action really, whenever there is a thought that arises, bring it back or figure out to whom the thought arises, or ignore it type of a thing, so that we don't give enough importance to the thought? And the follow-up thing is the elements like fear and jealousy, envy, all these are nothing but different thoughts?
Yeah, they're all nothing but thoughts. When we turn our attention back to ourselves to see who is thinking this thought, or who is aware of this thought, we are thereby turning our attention away from the thought back towards ourselves. So the way to be free of thoughts is not to fight with thoughts, simply ignore them. Attend to yourself. How to ignore thoughts? Attend to yourself. So there's only one thought we're allowed to attend to. That is the thought I. All other thoughts, if we attend to them, the more we attend to them, for example, a fear. Suppose you've got a fear. One day I may get this coronavirus, then I may become seriously ill and I may die. Suppose you've got that fear. The more you think about it, the stronger that fear becomes. How to get rid of that fear? Attend to yourself. Or for normal people, we'd say, instead of thinking that fear, think of something else. Watch the television, enjoy watching sports or something. But by diverting your thought away from one thought to another, you weaken that thought. But we're on the spiritual path. So how do we get rid of, we don't only want to get rid of the thought of the fear of coronavirus. We want to get rid of all thoughts. How to get rid of all thoughts? By attending to ourselves. Because, as I say, other thoughts are fed by our attention. Ego is the opposite. Ego is the first thought, but ego thrives on attending to other things. When it attends to itself, it begins to subside and disappear. It dissolves back into its source. So all we need to do, whatever thought may arise, who does it arise? To me, who am I? That we don't have to ask those questions. We don't have to think those thoughts. What Bhagavan means by that is we have to turn our attention away from the thought back towards ourselves. That is the way to give up thoughts.
Right.
So
I mustn't have any thoughts. I mustn't have any thoughts. You're just feeding, you're giving strength to thoughts by thinking I mustn't have thought, because the thought I mustn't have thought is itself a thought. Bhagavan used to say, if you're given a medicine and told, take this medicine is a very effective medicine, but it will only work if you don't think of a monkey when taking it. So whenever you take it, don't think of a monkey. Supposing you're told like that, you can never take that medicine, because as soon as you begin to take the medicine, I mustn't think of a monkey. You've thought of a monkey. So instead of, a wise doctor will not tell you to think of a monkey, but a wise doctor will tell you, when you take this medicine, think only of an elephant. Don't think of anything else, just an elephant. Thereby you avoid thinking of a monkey. So the monkey is all other thoughts. The elephant is ourself. Attend only to yourself. That's the way to get rid of all other thoughts.
So sometimes what happens, Michael, is the emotion gets me carried away so far that at that point, retracing or thinking about to whom this thought has come becomes almost an impossibility, because the emotion has just swayed you away in its ocean.
Yeah, well, the emotion emotion is our investment in that thought. Some thoughts are much stronger because we're emotionally we're emotionally invested in them. Take for example, I mentioned just now, fear of coronavirus. Supposing we have a great fear of that coronavirus. Whenever we think of, oh, I may get sick, I may die, there's emotional energy there. That emotional energy gives that thought strength. So sometimes when the thoughts are accompanied by a lot of emotion, as you say, sometimes it seems impossible to give it up. Don't worry, it will pass. Every emotion, its nature is moving. That's why it's called emotion. So what emotions that come, they also go. So if you're overcome by some emotion, let it be. When it passes, then attend to yourself.
Perfect.
If the emotion is too strong for you to overcome it, then there are other, okay, Bhagavan, I have this strong emotion. Please take this burden off me. I leave this burden to you. I can't deal with this emotion. Surrender to him. That can help.
Got it. The one last question I have is, we talk about the prarabdha karma affecting us externally. What happened? This is more of a theoretical question, but I had to ask this. What happened in the first life?
Okay, in the first life, it all started when ego rose. So if you want to find out how ego rose, you don't have to go back in time. Unlike the scientists who have to go back looking for the Big Bang to find out when it all started, it's starting each and every moment we are rising as ego. So let's find out, how did we rise as ego now? Let's look at this ego to find out how it arose. If we try to see how it arose, we have, in order to see how it arose, we have to look at it very carefully. Supposing there's a rabbit coming out of a rabbit hole. And every time it peeps out, if it sees you're looking at it, it goes back in. But if it sees you're not looking, it goes out and plays. Ego is like that. So we need to be constantly keeping a watch on that rabbit hole. That is ourselves. Where is this ego peeping out from? If we're constantly watching ourselves, ego will be hiding in, waiting for us to be inattentive. So we have to, if we attend to ourselves keenly enough to find out how this ego rose, we will eventually move back into our source. Then we will find ego never rose. So then the problem is solved. Ultimately, all this is Maya. Ego itself, but what is Maya? Maya itself is ego itself is Maya. Bhagavan says in verse 26, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. So ego itself is Maya. All this Maya, Maya is said to be anivachaniya. That means often it's said inexpressible, but I think what is implied by anivachaniya, it's inexplicable. We cannot explain Maya. So let's not try and explain it. Let's see how it came into existence. Let's see, what is this Maya? Maya is nothing but ego. So let's investigate ourselves. When we investigate ourselves, we'll find there's no such thing as ego. So there never was any Maya, never was any prarabdha, agamya, sanchita, never was anything. There was only I am. So if we try to explain Maya, it's endless. So that's the job of scientists and philosophers. They're constantly, they may not accept that this is all Maya, but all their efforts to try and explain this manifestation is an attempt to explain Maya. They can go on for yugas after yugas after yugas. There'll be no end to it. But if we want to really understand the secret of Maya, turn within and we'll see there's no such thing at all.
Thank you, Michael. That explains. I appreciate it.
Next question is, the last question for today is from Mike, from Manoj. Go ahead.
All right. Sorry. Thank you. I didn't think I was going to have time. I'll try to be as quickly as possible. This was in relation to self-attention and thought. So my thoughts are the ego. And when I'm self-attending or in meditation, I've had the experience of where my thoughts are going and going and going, and then I'm just letting go by just observing or watching them pass on the screen. And it eventually, my experience, excuse me for being so loose with that word, has my experience of the thoughts going away deepens my experience of, if I'm correct, the I am. Is that accurate? Am I overthinking this? Is that what I'm doing?
I think perhaps you're overthinking.
Okay.
As long as we are aware of thoughts going away, we are aware of thoughts. We can't be aware of thoughts going away without being aware of them. Our aim, if we turn our attention back towards ourselves, we won't even notice the thoughts going away because we won't notice them at all. So our aim is not even to see the thoughts going away. Our aim is just to see ourselves.
Okay, that was more accurate. That's been my experience. Okay, thank you. You answered.
Thoughts are no concern of ours. Let them come or go. Let them take care of themselves. We are not concerned with them. We are only concerned with knowing ourselves.
So essentially there's a dissipation of thoughts, right? Right.
Thoughts cannot exist without our attention. Thoughts seem to exist because we attend to them. If we attend only to ourselves, thoughts they'll disappear because we're not attending to them.
Okay, that answers. Okay.
Bhagavan's teaching is so practical. He's so practical. He says, what's it matter how many thoughts appear? Attend to yourself. All you attend to yourself.
Okay, you answered it. Thank you. I got it. I'm definitely overthinking it. I'm trying to be one of those scientists who needs an explanation over and over, and it'll never end. Yeah.
Some explanations are a little bit useful on this path, but more explanations leads to endless philosophy. We can write volumes and volumes and volumes of explanations, but ultimately we need to come back to the practice. I mean, and why to wait for ultimately? Here and now we need to come back to the practice. Why to delay things? So what Bhagavan has given us certain explanations. Those explanations are useful to turn us within. But we should always remember that one aim of whatever Bhagavan has taught us, the one aim of it is to turn our attention within. So all that matters is that we turn our attention within. So if the explanation helps us to turn our attention within, well and good. If not, forget the explanation. Turn within. That's all that matters.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. I got it. Yeah. That was profound. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Well, I've had experiences with a couple of friends who are very intellectual, and they go on and on and on. They need these explanations.
I don't know if you know the story of Aruṇāchala, Brahma and Vishnu. Brahma represents the intellect going up and up and up and up and up, seeking the end. There's no end.
Right.
Subside within that Vishnu. That is the end.
Right.
The end is only when we subside.
Okay. Thank you. I understand now. I appreciate it.
Nature is to go outwards. We have to turn it back to go within.
Thank you. I got it. Thank you.
Right. Pleasure.
Very grateful.
So I just think there's one sentence from Nāṇyar. What Bhagavan says, "Ettanai eṉṇங்கள் எழினும் என்ன?"
Yes, exactly.
However many thoughts arise, so what?
So what? Yeah, big deal.
I mean, it just really nails it there.
Yes, exactly.
We will conclude today's session. Michael, any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts is the closing thought. We need to close.
Closing thought, exactly.
How to close our thoughts? By ignoring them and attending to ourselves.
Right.
We have to bring a close to all thoughts, including this first thought, ego. And we can close the ego only by attending to it and seeing that it doesn't actually exist. The snake is only a rope. That is the closure of all thoughts. That is, the ego is only pure awareness. Then only all thoughts come to an end.